They called him a failure. 7 exams, 7 defeats. But what no one saw was the battle he fought every single day. A battle that would one day change not only his life, but the lives of others. Daniel grew up in a tiny Ethiopian village where electricity was rare, books were precious, and every dream seemed too expensive to reach. But inside that small home lived a boy with a very big dream. His father worked long days in the fields, while his mother sold vegetables at the local market. Together, they worked from morning until evening, earning barely enough to provide for their family. Whenever Daniel felt tired, his father would tell him, "Study hard. No one can steal what you learn." Daniel didn't understand how important those words were yet, but he carried them in his heart. Every night, while the village slept, Daniel studied beneath the weak light of a smoking kerosene lamp. His books were old, his desk was simple, but his dream was bigger than his circumstances. He believed that if he worked hard enough, success would eventually come. So he studied, practiced, failed at difficult questions, and tried again. Every day, he pushed himself a little further. Then the day of his first national exam arrived. Daniel walked into the classroom with a nervous heart but a hopeful mind. He believed this could be the day everything changed. But when the results came, his name was missing. Daniel searched the list again, then again. Finally, he understood. He had failed. That night, Daniel cried quietly so his parents wouldn't hear him. He stared at his books and wondered if perhaps everyone was right. Maybe he wasn't smart enough. Maybe his dream was too big. Before sunrise, Daniel wiped away his tears. He knelt beside his bed and whispered, "God, if you still have a purpose for me, give me the strength to try again." The next morning, Daniel returned to the fields with his father. His hands worked the soil, but his mind kept replaying every mistake from the exam. Failure followed him like a shadow. A week later, some of his classmates left for university. They carried new bags and smiled with excitement. Daniel smiled too, but behind that smile was a pain he didn't know how to explain. Soon, people in the village began whispering, "Maybe school isn't for him." Every word hurt, but Daniel said nothing. He simply continued walking, carrying his old backpack and his unfinished dream. That evening, Daniel locked himself in his room. He stared at his failed examination paper for hours. Then he folded it carefully and placed it away, wondering whether it was time to give up. For the first time, Daniel questioned whether God had forgotten him. He looked toward the night sky and whispered, "Why is this happening?" But somewhere deep inside, another voice seemed to answer, "Not yet." The following morning, his mother quietly placed breakfast beside him. She didn't ask about the exam. She simply smiled and said, "We're proud of you because you didn't stop trying." Those simple words changed something inside him. Daniel realized that success wasn't the only thing that mattered. Sometimes, remaining faithful when life is difficult is already a victory. Daniel made a new promise to himself. He wouldn't try to become perfect overnight. He would simply become 1% better every day. So he created a study schedule and started again. Days became weeks, and weeks became months. While others searched for quick success, Daniel quietly built discipline. He studied when he felt motivated, and especially when he didn't. When the second exam arrived, Daniel entered the classroom with more preparation than before. He had studied harder, prayed harder, and believed again. But he still didn't know what the result would bring. A week later, the results arrived. Daniel opened the envelope with trembling hands. His eyes moved across the paper. Then his heart sank. He had failed again. A week later, the results arrived. Daniel opened the envelope with trembling hands. His eyes moved across the paper. Then his heart sank. He had failed again. 2 failures. Most people would have stopped. Daniel almost did. That evening, he sat beneath an acacia tree overlooking the valley and wondered how many times a person could fall before finally giving up. That night, Daniel packed away every book. "Maybe this dream isn't meant for me," he whispered. For the first time, he wasn't just tired. He was completely exhausted. The next morning, his father noticed the empty study desk. Without saying anything, he went outside and began repairing an old wooden chair that Daniel used to sit on while studying. Daniel asked him, "Why are you fixing that chair?" His father smiled and answered, "Because I believe you'll need it again." Those few words reached Daniel deeper than any speech could. That evening, Daniel unpacked every book. He placed them back on the desk and sat in the repaired chair. He didn't feel motivated, but he had learned something more powerful than motivation: discipline. From that day forward, Daniel studied whether he felt inspired or not. Before sunrise, he studied. After working in the fields, he studied. When it rained, he studied. When he was tired, he studied. Months passed. Daniel stopped counting his failures and started counting faithful days. On his wall, a small calendar slowly filled with check marks. One mark for every day he kept his promise. One evening, while reading an old textbook, Daniel suddenly smiled. He wasn't studying because he was afraid of failing anymore. He was studying because he had discovered the joy of learning. When the third exam arrived, Daniel walked into the classroom calmly. He still wanted to pass, but he was no longer controlled by fear. Whatever happened, he knew he had become a different person. When the exam ended, Daniel walked home quietly. This time, he didn't replay every question in his mind. He had given everything he could, and for the first time, that was enough. Days passed, and life continued. Daniel helped his father in the fields, laughed with his younger siblings, and studied every evening, not because he feared failure, but because he loved learning. Then, one bright morning, a motorcycle stopped outside their home. A teacher stepped down holding a white envelope. Daniel's heart began racing before he even knew why. The teacher walked toward him and smiled. "Daniel, I think you should open this yourself." His parents and siblings gathered around him. Everyone waited in silence. Daniel opened the envelope. His hands trembled. His eyes moved slowly across the page. Then he stopped. Tears filled his eyes. The words were simple. "Congratulations. You have passed." His mother covered her face and cried. His father looked toward the sky with quiet gratitude. Daniel embraced them both. After all those nights, all those tears, and all those failures, the moment had finally arrived. Years later, Daniel graduated from university. As he stood in his graduation gown holding his diploma, he remembered the boy who once believed that one failed exam meant his life was over. But Daniel didn't forget where he came from. Instead of chasing fame, he returned to his village and began teaching young students who believed they weren't good enough. Whenever a student wanted to quit, Daniel would smile and say, "This test does not measure your worth. It measures one moment. Your story is much bigger than one moment. So remember this: failure is not the opposite of success. Sometimes, it is the road that prepares you for it. Keep your faith. Protect your discipline. Keep moving forward. Your current chapter is not your final chapter. One day, you may look back and realize that every setback was preparing you for a purpose greater than you imagined. If this story reminded you that failure is not the end, then remember, your journey is still being written. Here on this channel, we share stories about faith, discipline, hard work, perseverance, and the strength to keep going when life gets difficult. If you believe your struggles can become part of your purpose, subscribe and walk with us. Because sometimes, the person who refuses to give up is the person who changes everything. Until the next story, keep believing, keep working, and never give up.